Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Sharon Bown, and joining us this evening from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader Pierre Coetzee. Today we commemorate the 106th anniversary of the Second Battle of Villers-Bretonneux, which was fought on the 24th and 25th of April 1918 in northern France. The battle was the first to involve tank against tank fighting, with German tanks engaging British tanks. A gap was opened in the British lines, and the fall of Villers-Bretonneux was feared that the Germans would break through to Amiens. The immediate recapture of Villers-Bretonneux was ordered, and that night the 13th and the 15th Australian Brigades went into action. One brigade approached from the north, one from the south, meeting at the eastern edge of Villers-Bretonneux and surrounding the enemy force and driving them from the village and adjacent woods. By the end of the following day, Villers-Bretonneux was again in Allied hands, but the cost of victory was high. While British troops had borne the brunt of the German offensive attack and exhausted the German troops, the Australians suffered almost 1,500 casualties in taking back Villers-Bretonneux. After the war, the location of the battle was chosen as the site for the main memorial to Australians killed on the Western Front, the Australian National Memorial. It lists the names of over 10,000 Australian soldiers with no known grave who were killed on the Western Front. Today we remember the Second Battle of Villers-Bretonneux. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. This evening, we are very honoured to acknowledge General Detnatit Longnamkum, Director General of the War Veterans Organisation of Thailand, accompanied by Mrs. Anyusara Rojjana Pradit, President of the Wives Association of the War Veterans Organisation of Thailand. We also acknowledge Dr. Susan Newhouse, Member of the Council of the Australian War Memorial, and Ms. Christine Zeitz, Chief Executive Officer of Northrop Grumman, Australia. We would also like to acknowledge their accompanying delegations. We warmly welcome Rear Admiral Philip Spedding, retired, and former crew members of HMAS Stuart and their families. HMAS Stuart was part of a group of coalition ships charged with the maritime security in the North Arabian Gulf, including 2 offshore oil terminals. On this day, 20 years ago, 3 members of USS Firebolt's crew were killed when a fishing vessel approaching one of the oil terminals detonated a large IED, an improvised explosive device. HMAS Stuart immediately sent Seahawk 872 to Firebolt's position to render assistance and to attempt the rescue of any survivors. Seahawk 872 has since been donated to the memorial and forms a very valuable part of our national collection. We also warmly welcome the Legacy Youth Delegation and 5 Wing Australian Air Force cadets in attendance today. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that continue to serve, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. Now, if you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Those requiring a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Joseph Stanley Pethybridge. Joseph Pethybridge was born in 1888 in Parks Plains, Victoria, one of 7 children born to William Pethybridge, a farmer, and his wife Ellen. He attended a local state school before relocating to Narrogin in Western Australia with his family, sometimes around 1910. Joey later moved to the town of Highbury and was working as a farmer when the First World War broke out. Joey Pethybridge enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 9th of June 1916. He was assigned to the 6th Reinforcement of the 51st Infantry Battalion with the rank of private and commenced a short period of training in Australia. He embarked for active service in October that year, sailing from Fremantle on the troop ship Suffolk. Private Pethybridge arrived in England, disembarking at Plymouth on the 2nd of December 1916. He trained there before making his way to the Western Front in the new year. He joined the rest of the 51st Battalion at the camp in Bazentin on northern France for working parties and routine trench duty. In early 1917, enemy forces began making a strategic withdrawal to the fortified Hindenburg Line. The 51st Battalion was involved in the pursuit of German forces before being drawn into an attack on the village of Nuruyi in early April. Pethybridge was wounded with a gunshot wound to his left thigh and spent most of the month in hospital before rejoining his unit in time to be transferred to the Ypres sector in Belgium. In June, Pethybridge was wounded for a second time during his unit's attack at Mezenay Ridge, suffering injuries to his upper arm, and was evacuated to England for treatment for several weeks. He was granted a short period of furlough in August and returned to the front in September of 1917, rejoining his unit just after the Battle of Polygon Wood, where Australian forces suffered almost 6,000 casualties. Pethybridge and his comrades spent the rest of the year enduring a cold winter at the front as they rotated in and out of the trenches. During this period, the Russian monarchy collapsed and fighting on the Eastern Front came to a close. With Germany no longer fighting a war on 2 fronts, Allied forces expected a major attack. This came in early 1918, with the German spring offensive and heavy attacks at strategic locations along the Allied front. The 51st Battalion, alongside the rest of the 4th Division, was rushed to defend positions around Dinnekel and were involved in repulsing several large-scale German attacks. The threat to the Allied front reached a critical point on April 24th, when enemy forces captured the strategically significant town of Villers-Bretonneux. Allied forces were desperate to recapture the town quickly, to prevent enemy forces from digging in and fortifying their position. But no British counterattacks were successful in dislodging the enemy, who strengthened their defences. Pethybridge, with the rest of the 13th Brigade, was immediately marched to the outskirts of the town where they joined the 15th Brigade as plans for an attack were made. They began their advance just after 10 p.m., with the 15th Brigade advancing from the north and the 13th Brigade from the south in a risky manoeuvre. Pethybridge and his comrades were able to link up with the 15th Brigade east of the village, though some members of the trapped German garrison escaped. Just after the dawn the next day, the Australians began their clearance of Villers-Bretonneux, sweeping through the ferocity while British troops advanced from the north and west sides. Within just hours, Villers-Bretonneux had been retaken in an act which General Monash later deemed as the finest thing yet done in the war. The recapture of the town cost Allied forces almost 1,500 casualties. Among the dead was Private Joey Pethybridge, who was killed in action. Chaplain Blackwood wrote to Pethybridge family as follows: Joey was killed by a shell just on being relieved and was taking shelter at the time in a shell hole. I know how hard it is for you to have lost one so dear to you, but I feel that he is not really lost. He has truly laid down his life for others. His final resting place was lost, and today he is commemorated on the Australian National War Memorial at Villa Britneux. Private Joey Pethybridge was 29 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph, alongside fellow troops of the 51st Battalion, is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Joseph Stanley Pethybridge, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the year condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's redevelopment project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.